What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated on Fan Nation. Joining me on the show is Dylan Rubenking. He's a reporter for us at Ducks Digest, does a little bit of everything. We got some breaking news to get into right off the bat here. Huge recruiting weekend for the Ducks. Oregon just now today, Monday, January 31st, landing a commitment from 2022 cornerback, Jaleel Florence out of Lincoln High School in San Diego, California. Florence was here over the weekend on an official visit, and the Ducks snag a massive commitment in the days leading up to signing day. Dylan, just kind of want to get your reactions off the top here, and we really want to break this one down.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. I mean, the fact that he was, committed back in the summer and then decided to open things back up in December after Mario Cristobal left. It's huge that they brought him back with the whole brand new staff and they sold him on, everything that they're going to be building. So the fact that, he took that last visit this past weekend and that kind of seemed to seal the deal. I think that's huge for Oregon and for him. So I'm glad that he decided to come back, and I'm glad that he's going to have a real opportunity to play in year one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of, caliber of a player that we're looking at with Florence, right? I think you're looking at a guy who's capable of contributing early, albeit at a position that is really difficult to contribute early with. You don't see a ton of guys across college football always playing cornerback early. Even look at Mykael Wright, who was I believe the highest rated corner that the Ducks have ever landed. I might need to fact check that one, but the point is he was a super highly rated guy, and he didn't even become a bona fide starter necessarily, for the Ducks as a freshman. He was kind of playing a little bit as a rotational guy. And he was walking into a pretty solid situation when the Ducks had Thomas Graham, Diamador Lenore already in place and, with some football under their belt. And I think that might be a little bit of a different situation now with Florence. I don't know if we have to get into this right now, but just kind of talking about his fit and the situation that he's going to be coming into at Oregon. Not a lot of depth and experience at corner. You see Mykael Wright going to the NFL draft. You see DJ James. Oops, sorry, I'm getting a call. Sorry about that. Try to always mute my laptop, but I forgot to this time. That's okay though. But yeah, so we have Wright and James departing from the program, and Triquez Bridges and Dante Manning, coming back after their biggest playing time in 21, and then you have Christian Gonzalez coming in from Colorado. So maybe that's a cool place to start for us. Kind of how do you think this move affects the cornerback room, especially when you look at some of these recent additions that we've seen?
Yeah, you make a good point about freshmen starting early. Like, I think the last time I can remember Oregon corners starting year one was maybe Thomas Graham and Diamador Lenore back in 2016, but that team was pretty bare. It was a rough year that year. So, they were kind of rebuilding. So I don't really take that. I don't really take that comparison too much, but, just to go back on the last time that they probably did that. But I think that he's a guy that they can develop and have him contribute pretty early on. You mentioned that there's a lot of young talent. We've talked about it often. Avante Dickerson should probably get some playing time. Jalen Davies is still out there. He probably got the most out of the guys that came in last year in terms of playing time. And then there's Darren Barkins, who didn't play, I don't think, until the Alamo Bowl. But I would expect that, Christian Gonzalez, with his relationship with Coach Meat and his experience in the Pac-12 as a starting corner, lined up against number ones, I would expect him to be a starter, maybe alongside a Manning or Bridges. Maybe they kind of rotate those two guys out like we saw last year. But I think that, having those two guys be the most experienced is a little, it's kind of tough just because you've had those reliable corners for the last few years. Talk about Graham, Lenore, Mykael Wright, and now you're kind of starting from scratch almost with a whole new defensive coordinator, new cornerbacks coach. You're really going off of guys with 1 year of experience at Oregon specifically. So, I like the addition of Florence because I think he's a plug and play guy. He's not afraid to make a tackle. He's not afraid to get physical. He's not afraid to, cover a guy in man or in zone. He's phenomenal wherever you put him on the field. And if they want to, like we see here, you can put him on as a kick returner, as a punt returner. and he can make plays. I think he does a little spin here, not to spoil it. Oh, that's another one, I think. But he does a lot of really good stuff as a returner. So, if they want to get him on the field, maybe that's one thing, kind of like what they did with Mikael Wright early on. Maybe that's a way that they can get him on the field and, show what he's about.
If you guys are watching along with us on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Tours, we got some highlights that we have on the screen right now to kind of help us break down what the Ducks are getting in their latest commit here in Jaleel Florence, and that's one of the things that I think is really appealing about Florence, is the fact that he brings so much versatility to the table. Can move around a little bit in the secondary. I mean, this guy's most likely looking like a corner, but if you're looking at the situation in Eugene, the Ducks do need some help at safety as well. You lose consensus All-American safety Verone McKinley to the NFL draft. Bennett Williams, thankfully, was able to play in the Alamo Bowl, so he's not, just returning from injury on the first game of the year against Georgia, so that's good. Jamal Hill, I think he had a decent season last year, but not the best season, and for me personally, not the season that I was kind of expecting or that I thought he would be capable of after seeing how he wrapped up the 2020 season with those 2 picks against USC in the Pac-12 championship. But he's a guy that is there to work with, and he's a veteran guy, he's an experienced guy, which is obviously going to be really advantageous for a new coaching staff when you're coming into the secondary, and you don't want to just be working with guys that are coming in straight out of high school. I think when we talk about some of those guys like Diamondor Lenore and Thomas Graham, I think that the situation isn't the exact same right now heading into the 22 season, but honestly it's not all that different. Graham and Lenore were talented guys coming out of high school, but the Ducks didn't have a lot of choices there, and they kind of just got thrown into the fire. So we talked about with Bridges and Manning, the Ducks do have some pieces already in place, and then they get that veteran presence with Christian Gonzalez. But with kind of the way this class is shaking out, the Ducks just got Kamari Terrell out of Texas on Friday, heading into the weekend. I've talked to a couple of different people, and even though he's kind of listed as a corner, some people see him as more of a safety. And then the Ducks also have Jalen Davis Robinson from Waxahachie High School out in Texas still on the board. So it was kind of a lot at once, but I think it's just cool to dive into some more of that impact and how likely it maybe is that we see him contribute. And he's also not the only guy coming out of San Diego for the Ducks in this class.
Yeah, Jaleel Tucker, I feel like he was a huge factor in, Florence's recruitment, because they kind of came in one right after the other to Oregon. And then Jaleel Tucker ended up signing, and Florence was already looking for, he had already opened up his recruitment again after that. But I still feel like him being, committed to Oregon, still signing with Oregon, I feel like that played a role in Florence coming back. And obviously, like it has a lot to do with the coaching staff and, the fit, just if he's a priority there, which I'm glad that he was a priority for this coaching staff, because you kind of saw some of the guys who were committed to kind of, faded out. It seemed like they were, going after guys at that position when they already had some people at that position, but it didn't seem like they were a priority. But Florence, you talk about Dan Lanning when, he called him right after the national championship. Like that's the definition of priority right there. So I'm glad that, he and Tucker get to play together again. You talked about the safety fit, and I was watching his film, watching it now even. I see kind of, he's lined up as a corner, but I see this physicality and this toughness of a safety. Like I feel like he could fit in terms of that. And he's got good size too, 6'1", 6'1.5", 180 pounds. Maybe he could bulk up a little bit if they need him to, and which he probably will. I mean, you don't really stick to the same size when you come to, a college program. Usually they bulk up a little bit. But I do expect that he'll probably be a corner. Maybe I wouldn't say he'd be maybe second string, but I think you could see him on an organizational chart week 1. And even in the spring, I'm very excited to see what he can do in the spring ball, because I think he's a guy that, will get the best out of some of those receivers, and, the receivers will get the best out of him. Like he's got a really talented group of receivers that he can cover and get better against. And I think he's physical enough to cover some of those tight ends too. It's really exciting to see that, that play out at Oregon. And I think my favorite thing is actually right here that I was going to mention is the fact that he's so good at punching the ball out. There were a number of times where he punched it out, not just like forcing fumbles, but a guy would catch the ball and he'd make a play on it after it looked like the catch was secured. Like he's very good at locating the ball and punching it out. Whether he's coming from behind and trying to make a tackle on the chase down, or when he's kind of fighting, having a hand fight with a receiver. He's very impressive with his hands, and the fact that he's only been playing football for a couple years, like 2 years, is really impressive. He's a supreme athlete. I think they talked about he played basketball early in high school, and kind of started playing football around his junior year. And so the fact that he only has, about 2 years, a year plus the COVID year of playing football, and he's already got Oregon and USC after him is really, really impressive. And I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet at all.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more, during this episode of the podcast about, some of that impact. Like we're talking a lot about the on-field impact, but recruiting's that game within the game, and getting a win over USC like this is really, really important and crucial for the Ducks. But yeah, like you were saying, he is kind of a late bloomer who came onto the scene a little bit late, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I think is kind of what I was hearing when I was doing some research on him. Definitely you see his athleticism, with that, with his basketball skills carrying over to his ball skills, and just being able to make a ton of plays. You see, like you talked about with him punching the ball out on fumbles, being able to get a lot of yards after he, gets an interception, here and there. So I think that's super valuable. This whole secondary really, at least at corner that the Ducks have, really has a lot of speed. Jaleel Tucker might well be one of the fastest cornerbacks, one of the fastest defensive backs in this class in the state of California. Obviously, if you're talking about speed, you can't leave out Damani Jackson, who's committed to USC. He's got some serious burners as well. But you talk about Jaleel Tucker, we already knew how just crazy fast he is. Coaches that I talked to, that's like the first thing that they hit on when you ask him about Tucker, who's also at Lincoln out in San Diego. And then you have Kamari Terrell, who's another track guy. I think the time that I've kind of been able to gather is just from his Twitter bio. I think it's 46.2 seconds in the 400 meters. So you're looking at some really high-end speed there as well. And then Florence has a ton of speed. So I think the combination of playmaking skills that all these guys have, they're all willing and capable tacklers if they need to come down and lay the boom and run support. And then you have playmaking. So when I'm looking at this, kind of blend of those skills at cornerback, and then the Ducks still have Trajan Williams in the fold. He's verbally committed to Oregon right now. He was on campus in Eugene for a visit at the over this weekend. Man, I really, really like the direction that the secondary is headed as far as the guys that the Ducks are slated to bring in this 22 class.
Yeah, it's really young, but I think that with the coaching staff that they brought in with Lupoy and Demetrius Martin, I really like that. I have a lot of faith in them in terms of developing them. And it's going to be tough because you're going to see some guys who have been in positions that they've never been in. But I think there's a ton of potential, ton of talent, ton of athleticism all over. I mean, guys from last year that committed that I was talking about earlier, those guys have a ton of speed too, ton of athleticism. So it's going to be really fun to watch once those guys get on the field and get after it. I'm really looking forward to checking out the spring and seeing, who comes out on top, because there's now a lot of guys in the cornerback room that are going to be coming in. So it's going to be really fun to watch who works the way up on the board.
Yeah, lots of talent in that defensive backfield for the Ducks. I think for Florence, I'm not sure what his enrollment plans are right now. I mean, since he is a track guy, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to stick around and finish out his high school career, there as well. So just kind of, I guess, a bit of an educated guess here, but I would assume that he's going to be coming in June with, some of the regular timeline enrollees. But if they are able to get him on campus in the spring, I mean, what a huge bonus that would be, especially at his position, like we were talking about. Both he and Tucker, you want to get those guys on campus as soon as you can, get them learning the new system, get them around the other corners, and just get them ready for that college level. But I think let's switch gears a little bit, Dylan, and talk about the impact on the recruiting trail for the Ducks, here in this class. Adding Jaleel Florence now, I think is awesome. if you just look at it from a pure timing perspective, you're heading into National Signing Day on Wednesday. And you really pick up a lot of momentum, dating back to Friday with Kamari Terrell committing out of Texas. I got a video and a podcast up on him. So if you guys want to learn more about Kamari Terrell, definitely check those out. I think that you also have some of the transfers that we want to talk about, but to get him in the fold on Monday before signing day, when you still have some really big targets left on your board, I think that kind of sends a message to these other recruits saying, hey, I'm a big time prospect, and I have faith in, the vision of Dan Lanning and the rest of the staff. And you got to give a huge shout out to Demetrius Martin. That dude is a huge figure in the Southern California area, and is really, got a very strong, established coaching career, coaching resume of working with some top level guys. So, he's just got to be ecstatic over this news. And then I love what you were talking about with Dan Lanning, giving him a call as he's walking off the field, winning that national championship. It's just a really cool story that kind of went into getting this commitment, and the staff showing up at midnight at the end of the dead period to, visit with him. And they really pulled out all the big guns and put that full court press on from the word go.
Yeah, and I believe he was, bowling with some of the coaches as well. And he was talking about how Dan Lanning was the only guy that could match him in bowling. So I feel like just they had that communication, that click. You talked about the midnight meeting, and then they went out and bowling and had another visit right before he committed. I just felt like, he just kind of had them up there, on his list the whole time. Like, I just felt like Oregon was the front runner. I know I heard that he was very close to signing with USC around early signing period, but I just feel like there's more reasons for him, more benefits for him to go to Oregon. And you talked about the recruiting impact. I think it sends a message to USC specifically that, we know you got this, really good coaching staff. You've got all these transfers. You got these recruits to come back and to flip. But I mean, it's still Oregon. We're still this brand, and you're not just going to come in here and take our recruits. You're not just going to come in here and dominate the recruiting trail. We're still here, and I think that's the message that they send. Getting a guy from San Diego he took a visit to USC and had them in his final two. So I think this is really impressive. The fact that they prioritized him from the jump, from right as soon as the dead period ended. And, they got the last visit. I think that's always important, to get the last visit before, his commitment announcement. I think that's always important to, kind of have the last say. I'm sure he's been in communication with USC as well, but I just feel like that's kind of what you're left with. And when you have them to go back off of for that last visit, I think that's, more crucial. And it just seems like the trend nowadays is you see the guy that goes to, whatever his last visit was, you kind of see that that's usually where he ends up.
Yeah, that is definitely a bit of a trend that we see on the recruiting trail. Not 100%, and recruiting is far from a perfect science. But getting him back on campus, especially after he had said that he was going to be canceling his visits, I think is really big. Getting him around these other recruits, and having all of the other commits in town in this 2022 class, I feel like it's just building more and more and more momentum for the Ducks as they head to the end of this 2022 cycle. But here's a perfect kind of a point that I think sums up some of the impact that we see on the recruiting trail. Joseph Bonin, thanks for the comment, man. Thanks for coming into the show and spending some time with us. If you guys are in the live chat, definitely go ahead and let us know your thoughts about Jaleel Florence's commitment to Oregon and any other questions that you have on the recruiting trail. We're planning to go for about an hour or so today, so definitely want to get your guys' input, interact with you guys, and see what questions are on your mind as we head towards National Signing Day. But yeah, right here, like you see on the screen, Joseph says 1-0 in Lanning versus Riley. I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because this is a defensive guy, right? I think you see Lanning come into Southern California and show that the Ducks still have a stronghold in that area. Granted, we might be looking at a different story if this is an offensive guy, right? You got to look at, a lot of these guys from Southern California that want to play, with some elite offenses. It's going to be hard to go against Lincoln Riley. That's not to say that the Ducks wouldn't have won if that was the case in a recruiting battle like this, but You can definitely see Lanning establishing a priority and ultimately executing and getting him back on board, which is great. And USC, if you kind of just compare what they've been doing compared to Oregon, they've just been going crazy in the transfer portal. It seems like every guy that they're getting now is coming from the portal. You think back to what their class looked like before Riley, they were just taking, I felt like DB, and not a ton of talent in the trenches. So I think it's really cool to kind of look at the context of his commitment. You could, like we said, with Oregon versus USC, and then just kind of how Riley is kind of approaching the rebuild, and then you see Lanning, who you could argue is just reloading.
Yeah, and I think with Lincoln Riley, I feel like his approach is we're just going to outscore you, and I feel like USC teams in the past were really like that. So when you bring in an offensive-minded coach from a program like Oklahoma, where that's pretty much all they did was outscore you, I feel like he's just kind of bringing that mentality to USC. And of course, they got some really good defensive talented guys like Corey Foreman and Damani Jackson out there as well, but like you said, there's not so much, you know, I don't think you're going to see a dominant defense from USC. And I think that the defense is, you kind of figured it was going to be a priority for this Oregon recruiting staff. But if they can get some, momentum with offensive players, get them over USC, because Dave Yulee is going to be committing, I believe, on Wednesday, and he's got Oregon and USC in his top three, along with Miami. That would be another big one. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come with Oregon and USC, because the West Coast, it's going to be a battle between them on the recruiting trail and on the field, probably for as long as Lanning and Lincoln Riley are the coaches there.
Let's stay there for a second and talk about Dave Yulee, right? He gets on campus this weekend. The Ducks get him on campus for that last visit weekend. You talk about the three finalists, Oregon, USC, and Miami. The offensive line picture for the Ducks, I think, looks, I wouldn't say discouraging, but compared to what it was like before Cristobal left, you're like, okay, they definitely got some work to do. Right now, the Ducks have two commitments in the 2022 class. You look at Michael Wooten out of Sierra Canyon out there in Southern California, and then you look at Kavika Rogers out of Ka'apa in Hawaii. And, Yulee would be a huge addition for the Ducks. And he was most recently, before he got to Oregon, he was out in Miami for a visit, and then it was played in the Poly Bowl. I don't know. I mean, getting him on campus is obviously going to be crucial to kind of where the Ducks ultimately land with him and his recruitment. Getting him back on campus around a lot of those familiar faces. Hey, this was your family. These were the guys that you were here committed with. Getting them to have some one-on-one time with Adrian Clem, the new offensive line coach, and Dan Lanning is obviously a big benefit as well. But I don't know. I think it'd be nice to try to talk to him before he makes his commitment to kind of see where he's at. But I feel like I kind of am leaning towards Miami just because Cristobal and Mirabal were his lead recruiters here. You can't count them out for any offensive lineman, but you've talked to him, multiple times before he committed to Oregon, and we're kind of our lead insider there. So I'm curious if you agree with that or if you have any kind of differing opinions.
When he first decommitted from Oregon, my mind went to USC, but also that was before Miami, jumped into the picture. And I wasn't surprised that they did. I mean, the reason that he told me that he committed to Oregon was because of Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal. And he said he wanted to play for, an offensive line coach that could develop him and take him to the NFL to the next level. And, you've seen him do that before. Penei Sewell was a prime example. And Dave Yulee said that, he wanted to be the next Penei Sewell. He was all about that. And so I know he enjoyed USC very much as well. He actually called me from his visit there, and he absolutely loved it. And it sounds like he, had a blast in Miami too, and he would be back with, his coaches that brought him to Oregon. And so I feel like Oregon, I'm going to kind of backtrack of what I just said about, taking that last visit and, a lot of times guys commit there, but I'm not super confident that Dave Yulee will be back in Oregon gear. I would probably say it's closer to a USC versus Miami decision, because I know that he told me a couple of times that one of his top priorities as well was, the proximity with his family and trying to be close and have his family go to games and support him. And Oregon was a great fit. Being from Puyallup, Washington, it's only about a 4 or 5 hour drive to Eugene, give or take a couple hours with traffic. But I mean, you're talking about Miami, that's 3,300 miles away. USC is, closer, but still pretty far. So I would probably, if I had to pick right now, I'd go USC. I'd stick with what I thought after he decommitted. I'd be really surprised if he ended up going back to Oregon, but I feel like this trip will, this recent trip that he just took this weekend will help because he got to talk to, some of those other recruits, guys that he talked to at the Polynesian Bowl, like Ben Roberts and, Kawika Rogers. I have a feeling that could have helped as well. And of course, he got to see Roberts in Eugene this weekend as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit closer than I think they are, but I would probably guess that it's between USC and Miami right now.
Another thing from the weekend is a lot of these recruits that were on campus got to go to the basketball game. That was a huge win for the Ducks. Just beat the heck out of Oregon State. That was one of the best atmospheres I've seen at Matthew Knight Arena this whole season from covering games. So just another good aspect of the visit that I think can really help. Just seeing that football, basketball, whatever it is, Eugene and Duck fans are 100% behind this school, which I think is something that you obviously want to see. Before we talk about some more recruiting stuff, I do want to get some questions and comments here, Dylan. Just because we were just talking about Lincoln Riley and USC, wanted to get Brendan's comment up here. Riley was the same at Oklahoma, and honestly, his approach wasn't hugely successful when you look at the outcome of each season. Yeah, I think that Riley obviously was pretty successful at Oklahoma, but having a lackluster defense or just a defense that wasn't capable of stopping these high power offenses really hurt. And losing the battle at the line of scrimmage hurt. But he's going to have some consistency and continuity with Alex Grinch coming over to coach up that defense for him in USC. So I think that will probably, I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the ultimate factors or what we look at to determine a successful season for USC next year is how do they look in the trenches, because they were pretty lackluster there last season, and I think that's probably where they have some of the most room to grow.
Yeah, and I think with some of those Oklahoma teams, like the question was talking about, they have proof of developing NFL players on defense, but it's always an issue with like the unit and just some of their opponents. You see guys have really good individual seasons, and then as a unit they just give up tons and tons of yards, tons of points. And it seemed like they were getting a little bit better, like after they got, run out of the stadium by LSU in the playoff. It seemed like each year they were kind of getting a little bit closer, not really to like a dominant defense, but just, something that was, a defense worth watching, I guess, to where you knew it wasn't going to be a track meet every weekend. So I think it's going to be kind of tough for USC out of the gate in terms of defending, because you're going to see a lot of new players on that defense. There was a lot of movement with the transfer portal, guys entering the NFL draft. It's just going to be a really young new defense. It had transfers coming in as well, a couple. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what their mindset is in terms of, recruiting on that end, and what guys they can land on defense. Because they're going to get the playmakers. They've already got a ton of them. It's unfair almost how many that they've gotten through the transfer portal and through high school ranks. So I want to see if they can actually build a defense that people want to come to, and they know that they can go to the NFL and as win as a unit too.
No doubt. Yeah, we got to keep an eye on who they're able to bring in on defense as well. Had another question I wanted to get to coming from Eric. Eric asked, what do you guys expect our offense to look like next year? And then I think he had a follow-up comment just talking about, like looking like personnel grouping or running and passing, getting the tight ends involved, what kind of deal we maybe are expecting there. I definitely want to learn more about, Kenny Dillingham's offenses at Florida State. I'll admit I haven't done a ton of research in that regard, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see Oregon definitely remain a run-heavy team, run-first team. But at the same time, I think if I'm on this new staff, I can't help but look at last season and just say, wow, look at how much was left to be desired through the passing game. Look at all these elite weapons that we honestly didn't use enough. And like I mentioned in one of Eric's comments here, talking about getting the tight ends involved, I think that was something that was a focal point early, and then it kind of tapered out as the year went on. Is something that you and I have talked about before, Dylan. So definitely want to see the tight ends get more involved, especially with all the talent that they have there. As far as the running back and quarterback, we can talk about that maybe a little bit. Byron Cardwell is in a great spot to kind of be the face of that backfield, and then Seven McGee is another guy you have to look at depending on where they want to use him. They definitely have a little bit of a more need, I think, at wide receiver. So maybe we see him bounce back and forth. But just to bring this full circle with recruiting, another huge name that you got to keep an eye on is Jordan James out of Oakland High School in Tennessee. He's a 2022 recruit. Recently placed Oregon in his top 3 along with Florida and Georgia. He's still committed to Georgia, but did not sign during the early signing period. He was on campus for a visit 2 weeks ago, and Lachlan went to visit him in a home. So you got to think that Ducks are probably in the driver's seat there, and getting him in the fold with Jarek Broussard committing to Michigan State after visiting Oregon would definitely be a big boost for the outlook of this offense heading into 2022.
I think going back to the question, I would say that I think their aim, just based on what I've heard so far, is to be, in kind of a blanket statement, more explosive. I know Dan Lanning has used that a couple of times, but I think that they have options, right? They don't have Travis Dye and CJ Verdell anymore, but there are still some young guys who, if you give them an opportunity, I would bet that they're going to take advantage of it. And I think Cardwell is, the number one guy. So I think they can be a run first offense, but I do think I would rather see them, kind of throw it out through the air a little bit, just because of some of the teams that you're going up against in the Pac-12. I think, I would probably assume that Washington is going to be another air it out team again. I would say Washington State, you already know they're probably going to be an air it out team. Max Borghi's gone. So Arizona probably going to be an air it out team. So I just feel like that would be, I don't think it's going to be like a complete air raid offense, but I would expect it to be probably favoring a pass more, passing the ball more than running the ball more. And I agree with the tight ends sentiment. I think they absolutely need to get the tight ends more involved. I believe I read that Spencer Webb was on a Twitter Spaces the other day, and he was talking about how Kenny Dillingham wasn't going to just copy over an offense that he had from Florida State or from Auburn under Gus Malzahn or Mike Norvell. Like he wants to utilize what he has to their full potential. A lot of the offensive playmakers, he wants to utilize their strengths, was the key phrase that I saw. So hopefully we get to see a little bit of that, because there's tons of talent that, like you said, was left on the field a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully we can. I'm sure that a lot of Duck fans want to see some more creativity and inventive kind of play calling. And you look at what happened with Joe Moorhead last year. Comes to Eugene, in heading into the 2020 season as one of the more renowned play callers in all of college football. And then we only saw like just little glimpses. And then in the critical situations, we just saw some really stale play calling, and that kind of leads lends people to believe that Mario Cristobal was, just really controlling over what was happening on offense. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because he was kind of part of a headline that I think a lot of Duck fans are going to enjoy talking about. So stay tuned to see what we talk about there. But staying on the topic of offense, got another question here from Hoshi Lee. Thanks for the question. Do you see Ty Thompson starting this year, or Bo Nix was the question. And I think this is, obviously it's something that a lot of people want to talk about. You look at the quarterback position, it's the most important position on the field. One that the Ducks haven't quote unquote hit on since Justin Herbert. And I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, that was really just lucking out. He wasn't on their radar until super late in the process, and he wasn't really, highly recruited. You bring in Tyler Shuck, Anthony Brown didn't really go that well. I think a lot of people would agree with that. But we see another transfer come in Bo Nix, and I think that a lot of fans kind of got rubbed the wrong way by that, just because we've seen in Eugene, not year after year, but we've seen a lot of transfers come into this program, and it feels like for whatever reason, we're not getting a lot of young quarterbacks that get the opportunity to go out there and really show what they've got. We saw Ty Thompson in limited action last year. We hear good things about him all the time at practice, but when it comes time when they're getting their butts kicked, and it's like, okay, there's nothing to gain from leaving Brown in here. Why isn't Ty Thompson getting the start? or getting some play time. And I think that I don't really know what it is. You got to give the young guys a shot at some point. But I also understand if you're the staff bringing in another quarterback. You lose Tanner Bailey to ultimately ends up at South Carolina after Cristobal's departure. Makes a lot of sense. I think you have to bring in a quarterback again, and a transfer quarterback makes sense. But there's just a lot of moving parts here, and I am firmly of the belief that you got to give one of the young guys a shot, but I think they should also, earn it, and you got to have an open competition. So this is definitely something that has a lot of points of discussion.
Yeah, you kind of changed your tune just a little bit there from what we were talking about before. When we were talking about Bo Nix, I think we had a video on Bo Nix coming to Oregon. I remember you kind of said the same thing about the experience, and I was more on the side of developing what you already have. I've also kind of been a little bit more split as well, just because you look at the schedule that Oregon's got, especially the non-conference. Georgia in a neutral game, not a neutral game. They have BYU as well. That's not a gimme. And the Pac-12 schedule, I think the Pac-12 road schedule is just as tough, if not tougher, than it was last season. So I think that having experience, especially early, when you go against a team like Georgia and you go against a team like BYU early on, which I expect BYU to be reloaded again, I think it's safe to have an experienced quarterback, an experienced starting quarterback, be plugged in there. Was Bo Nix the best option? No, I don't think so. But I do think that it's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a safe bet for a guy that's gone up against elite defenses, elite coaches, his SEC starter for 3 years, most of 3 years. So I'd say that was kind of safe. But at the same time, this coaching staff has kind of made it a point, Dan Lanning specifically, about taking risks and, being explosive and just developing the guys that we have. It starts with the guys that we have. And then they went out and got Bo Nix. I just thought that was kind of an interesting turn of events. But I really like Ty Thompson. I really like Jay Butterfield. I think that when fans were talking about how Anthony Brown was still playing and they weren't putting in Ty Thompson and Butterfield and Ashford, it was like, well, they must not be that good. I don't believe that. I really have never believed that. I think they're plenty talented. I think they're ready. I just think that there was this faith toward experience in Anthony Brown that, kind of held the quarterbacks back, and we didn't get to see them as much as we probably should have. Because I think having Ty Thompson start that Alamo Bowl probably, I would say, would have put him in the driver's seat to be the starter against Georgia in week 1. And I think the new coaching staff would have had a little bit more faith seeing a full game's work of Ty Thompson against a program like Oklahoma on a stage like that. That's why I wanted him there so bad. But I feel like him not getting any starts, any, real experience, in a close game and, when things are on the line, I feel like that's why they, went to the portal. But I think regardless of whether they started Thompson or Butterfield, I still think another quarterback was coming. I just didn't think it was going to be a guy that, would probably be a guaranteed starter, like most people were saying, because of Kenny Dillingham's connection with them and the fact that he, helped him win the SEC Freshman of the Year, and they beat Alabama that year, and it looked like he was going to be the next great Auburn quarterback. I just don't know if I would give it to him right away, even though it seems like on paper he's guaranteed to be the starter. I think Ty Thompson is determined because of that. I think that kind of clicked in his mind, like, okay, I got to work even harder now. It's not just my job because I've been here and I'm, this 5-star, I'm this, I'm that. Like, I've got to go earn it. And I think he's got a great chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's something I kind of wanted to circle back on with what you were talking about. So we talked about, I think Anthony Brown starting and bringing in Bo Nix are similar in that they were the safe option, right? I think we agree that you want to have that it made sense for another quarterback to come in. You don't want to go into the next season with just Well, at the time, Robbie Ashford was still here, so it would have been 3 quarterbacks, but they all had virtually no experience. So I think that you don't want to put yourself in that situation. And I also agree kind of how the optics look with bringing Bo Nix in after his relationship with Kenny Dillingham. And I'm right there with the fans that want an open competition. I would never want a quarterback to win just because of previous connections. And I can understand why they would be concerned that could happen after seeing what Cristobal did and how much of a strangle, let's just call it what it was, a strangle he had on the offense. So I think that's great. But the point I wanted to go back on, Dylan, was I think development is such an interesting word. I've had, especially for quarterbacks, I've had this conversation, with some of my housemates, Jacob Archer in particular. And it's really, I think, kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I mean, you want to be able to develop a quarterback and bring someone in who is going to, start, I guess, maybe you redshirt him a year and then and then after that, they pick up and they play for 3 years. But at the end of the day, you just need a game-changing quarterback, a difference maker at quarterback, whether it be from the prep ranks or the transfer portal. You just need to get a great quarterback out there, whether it's for a year or multiple years. Sure, from a roster standpoint, bringing in a prep guy makes a lot of sense because you get some more longevity out of that. But I think a majority of this Oregon roster is really in win-now mode. So I think when you think about that, I think a move like Bo Nix makes sense. But all that said, I think if Ty Thompson doesn't get the job, isn't starting at some point this season, then I mean, it kind of, I'm not saying I want to question his ability at all, but you kind of figure that this is the time to make it happen because the job should be as open as it's ever been and it really wasn't open last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, you're talking about the win now. And I definitely think that's where they are and should be. But I feel like if you think about, we need an experienced quarterback to win now. I feel like you're just going to keep recycling rental quarterbacks every couple of years through the transfer portal, and you're never going to, develop a guy that you recruit from the high school ranks. And that kind of scares me just because you've seen what they've done with Marcus Mariota, where he redshirted 2011 and then came in 2012 and was the day one starter. Of course, he wasn't going up against Georgia and BYU in the first couple of weeks. It was like Arkansas State and Nicholls State or whatever it may have been. And then Justin Herbert, he wasn't a day one starter either. It was, I believe that was the Dakota Prukop year. Try not to remember that year as much, but I think that was Dakota Prukop. And then he struggled, and then they put Justin Herbert in. They get clobbered, but they still go back to him. I feel like they need to kind of have a mentality of taking a risk. Well, having faith in a guy like Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield. I know I've mentioned Ty Thompson more so, but I think Jay Butterfield is a really good option as well. So it does kind of scare me that they just want to prioritize an experienced quarterback when they just keep bringing in these 1-2 year rentals, and you have this talent like Ty Thompson and like Jay Butterfield, where it's like, I don't really have this faith that we're going to see them, really get the opportunity that they deserve. Because I know it's really scary to think about someone that's never started a game, has only played, I believe, 3 games in Ty Thompson, and someone that's only played 1 or 2 in Jay Butterfield against Georgia on a national television game in, a huge NFL stadium on prime time in week 1. Like that's really scary. I get that, but I think you just have to take a risk. But I would say that if I had to bet, I think it's going to be Bo Nix week 1.
It's going to be something that we're going to follow, obviously, all throughout spring football and fall camp, because we're not going to have our answer, probably until that week leading up to Georgia. But yeah, it's a big. I kind of want to say paradigm, but I have no idea if I'm using that right. It's like what you were saying, right? It's like, do you take the safe option? Hypothetically, let's consider that, Anthony Brown was the safe option. Bo Nix could be the safe option because he's more experienced and, risk potentially limiting yourself next season. Or do you lean into that, the unknown with a younger guy? And, maybe this one season isn't as great as you wanted it to be, but having that season of experience sets you up for success down the road, and maybe hypothetically, being better prepared in 2023 to, win some of those big games. So it's something that I'm sure has been on, coaching staff's minds for a while, but at some point, Saban did it at halftime in the biggest game of the year. And I feel like that's not the most fair comparison, right? You're talking about national championships, which Oregon hasn't been to since 2015 versus, just, regular season games or the Pac-12 title. But I think all Oregon fans will agree that they don't want the Pac-12 title or the Rose Bowl to be that big game that they finally find themselves in. They want it to be the national championship. So obviously, hitting on a quarterback and making sure you have a guy that you can probably get multiple seasons out of is going to be really crucial in answering this question of, what's going on at quarterback for the Ducks over these past couple of years and moving forward. And then it's probably worth mentioning here, since we're talking about some longevity, I think Nix does have 2 years of eligibility left to play because of the pandemic. But I think if the Ducks are able to get one of the quarterback recruits that they're going after, had a 5-star on campus, this past weekend, and oh man, I hope I say it right, Nico Iamaleava from Warren High School in Downey, California. If you can get a guy like that, then hopefully you're getting quarterbacks that are more and more capable of contributing early. Want to get to a new topic here as we kind of approach an hour, but wanted to kind of wrap up the quarterback discussion with your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that you have to take a risk sometimes to be a winner. I don't think you've ever seen a national champion be one that takes safe bets. And so I think that, and I'm not just talking specifically about quarterbacks. Like, you can talk about, Georgia winning with a guy who, was a former walk-on. Like, that's a risk right there, is starting a guy who is a former walk-on. Not everybody is just going to win with a Heisman winning quarterback. So there's risks at starting a true freshman or offensive line, or, starting a guy like Byron Cardwell as your starting running back. He's never been the full-time starter. That's a risk. But of course it looks like he has the most experience out of anybody back there. So it's kind of a safe bet. Maybe that's a bad example. But I feel like when you want to be a winner, you have to take risks. And I think that's what this Oregon team should do to get there. And I'm sure that there's a lot of guys in this coaching staff that realize that, just because of, that national championship experience with Lanning and LaPoy. I think those guys understand that.
Yeah. So we'll it's that, I don't want to say a hurdle, but like, that's going to be one of the biggest points that I think this new staff is ultimately graded and judged on, is, how do you manage the quarterback situation? They get a familiar face with Bo Nixon and a guy who's played some football. So it's going to be something to follow for sure. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it throughout the off season, but we kind of got on this just based off of, some of the questions that we were in comments that we were getting in the live chat. So, as always, want to let you guys kind of guide the discussion here in these live shows. But the Ducks did add another commitment over the weekend they did add another commitment over the weekend, and Nebraska transfer defensive lineman Jordan Riley. He comes to Oregon after 2 seasons at Nebraska, where he played under new defensive line coach Tony Tuioti. This is off the top, I think this is a great addition for the Ducks, just because you're adding more beef up front in the trenches. If I'm Dan Lanning, maybe he's looking at the roster and saying, I like what they have here, but I want to add more depth there, and I want to have some more big bodies that are kind of like what I was working with at Georgia. And 6'6", 310 definitely has a nice ring to it.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the last guy that was named Jordan that played defensive line for Oregon. That was a pretty good deal. I think defensive line was one of those things where you knew it was going to be some guys who kind of just had that that full year of experience last year. You lose Kayvon. It's hard to replace him, but they still have a lot of guys in the middle that they can build around. But it seems like they really brought an emphasis on, like you said, kind of big bodies in the middle. Ben Roberts, Sir Mells. I know those guys were the last coaching staff, but Sam Taimani and now Jordan Riley. Like, I think that's just been a really big emphasis that I wasn't necessarily expecting them to keep going back on, because I thought Ben Roberts and Sir Mells, I figured that kind of would have rounded it out a little bit just from a defensive tackle perspective. But they've added, a former starter in Sam Taimani from Washington. Jordan Riley was not as much a starter at Nebraska. I think I read he played 10 games last year and registered a couple tackles, but I don't think he was a starter. But he's a former JUCO transfer, started, I believe, at North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago. So he's been around a number of programs. I think his first year was 2017. So an older guy, an experienced guy, but having that experience and to go along with Tony Tuioti, the defensive line coach, I think that's only going to help.
Yeah, just to confirm what you were talking about, I think he's from North Carolina originally, like that's where he was born, and then he played at Garden City Community College in Kansas before ultimately getting out to Nebraska and then coming to Oregon. But I think this addition makes a lot of sense because the defensive line was definitely an area that I think needed some more depth. I don't think this solves the need for an edge rusher, but that's not necessarily a guy you're going to find in the transfer portal. The Ducks did offer former Georgia Tech defensive lineman Jared Ivey, who I think maybe is a little bit more of that edge rusher kind of build. I'm trying to look him up right now because it was someone that is on Oregon's radar now. Let me see here though. I'm trying to see kind of what is going on here. It looks okay, wow. 247 is reporting that he committed to Ole Miss, so maybe I just missed that. Let me see. Hold on. Because that would obviously mean he's off Oregon's board. But when I looked him up, it said that he was committed to Ole Miss. So maybe one of us can check that while we're talking. But I do think it just makes a lot of sense for the Ducks to add in the trenches, because if you can't get an edge rusher, you can at least still get some really big bodies up there to stop the run. I think that was an area that the Ducks were maybe not the best at early in the season, and then they just kind of gradually got better and were able to ultimately turn that around. But I like the depth up front, with Riley, and then Taimani is listed at 6'2", 330. So it's definitely some huge bodies to add into the fold, and you got Ben Roberts and Sir Mells as well. So that 22 class and along the defensive line is definitely looking real solid, and all those guys are immediately eligible to contribute this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a ton of huge bodies. I didn't feel like they had as many to kind of play around with, but there's still guys like, Keanu Williams, Christian Williams, Keon Ware-Hudson, Popo, Brandon Dorless. There's so many guys now that they can have. So I'm curious to see how much guys like Taimani and Riley play. I wouldn't expect Riley to be an immediate contributor, one of the first guys off the bench maybe. I'd say Taimani would be kind of that first guy off the bench just because he has that starting experience at UW on some really good defenses. But I think it's just nice to add depth and to have huge guys that you can go to off the bench. But yeah, I agree with your point that stopping the run was I wouldn't call it a strength from last year, but I do think that it was something that they were significantly better at from the 2020 season. I think that's really safe to say.
All right, so just following up on what we said last, let's see. So I'm looking at our Ole Miss site, Grove Report with Sports Illustrated. So there were reports today that from On3's Matt Zenitz, and then Bruce Feldman reported that Georgia Tech defensive lineman Jared Ivey is expected to enroll at Ole Miss to start the week. And then you also think about Ole Miss making some big additions with former USC quarterback Jackson Dart committing and Michael Trigg, a former tight end from USC. That's a huge duo to add, especially when you think about Ole Miss losing Matt Corral. But yeah, just wanted to make sure that we circled back on that and kind of clarify where things are. So it looks like Ivy is going to be going to the SEC from these reports if he does end up playing at Ole Miss. But there was another transfer addition that we have to make sure we give a shout out to and talk about. Oregon added a commitment from Andrew Boyle, former Washington State kicker, over the weekend. And this one's a little bit interesting because I think, Henry Cattleman transfers out, and Camden Lewis had a really solid season, definitely his best season as a Duck. So I don't know if this is a scholarship guy that they're taking or a preferred walk-on. I need to do a little bit more digging on that. But I guess you just want to keep adding, some guys, looking down the line.
Well, I think that his power is something that we have not seen from Oregon kickers, really. I mean, he was shooting some videos from Washington State's practice field, kicking 69, 70, 72-yard field goals. So I feel like he's one of those guys that you can't really pass on. That doesn't mean that he's going to be the next Justin Tucker, the next Adam Vinatieri, a guy that can kick that far. But, a guy with that power at the college level is crazy. So I feel like he's just one of those guys that you see, and you just want to take a shot at him. But in terms of his experience, I think I read he only was like a kickoff specialist. I think he was only on kickoffs. He didn't do any punts or any extra points, any field goals for Washington State. So I believe Camden Lewis has probably got the job again. But there's now a need at the backup kicker that Henry Cattleman transferred to Colorado State. So maybe that's what that was about.
That would make a lot of sense, Dylan. I think another area that coaches, obviously have to manage is the roster management. How well is a coach? How skilled is a coach rather at identifying those needs and identifying guys that can help fill those needs and then landing them. It's not just a super quick process. It's not a bang bang deal. But maybe I could see that becoming, a little bit of an underrated move, next season. If Lewis isn't doing well for whatever reason, you have another guy that you can turn to now. And I think that special teams is going to be an area that the Ducks are definitely looking to improve in. Joe Lorig comes in, I believe, as the new special teams coordinator. I think the Ducks were really, really lacking on the kickoff department last year. We had a couple of decent returns that we saw from Micah Pittman, and he's obviously not here anymore. But to have a guy like Mikael Wright back in fielding kicks, and I feel like there were only a handful of good returns. I think that's going to be somewhere that they really need to improve on. And Tom Snead, I think one of the better punters in the Pac-12. So we got to give the special teams some love because it's a big part of the game. You know all too well. This is so petty of me, but all too well as a Packers fan when my Niners blocked that kickoff, that field goal. That it's a legitimately important part of the game, and if you're playing those close games, maybe a special teams play will be the difference between a win and a loss.
Way to drag me through the mud. Well, we were rolling here. I guess I'll take the high road and I won't comment on your 49ers.
No, go for it. I'm open for it. I'm still sad. I'm still mad at Jimmy.
No, it's okay. I'll take the high road here, but I do acknowledge that special teams is very important. Not just field goals, not just returns. It's all of it. It's the gunners. It's blocking kicks, having your kicks blocked. That's a big part of everything. So. And I know Will Hutchinson at the end of the year was kicking off, I think, in the Alamo Bowl and maybe even the Pac-12 championship. I don't remember, but I know they put him out there to do some kickoffs. So maybe that's where they kind of see Boyle, see his role. But he's obviously got a boot. I think they could use him as a field goal kicker. I think he was listed as a punter too on Washington State's website on their roster. So he's a guy that can do it all, no matter what you want him to do. He can kick balls. That's what he does, and he's very, very good at it. So I think a guy of that caliber, you can't really pass on him, like I said.
Absolutely, man. So I kind of want to wind down this episode of the pod. We got a couple more things to hit on. One of the biggest visitors from this past weekend was a 5-star defensive end, Mateo Uiagalelei. A lot of people will recognize that last name, which I honestly feel like I'm kind of like really, really comfortable saying now. Like I'm really pretty nice with that name. His brother obviously being DJ Uiagalelei, the Clemson quarterback. I really think, after talking to him, I went out to St. John Bosco over the summer and was able to meet him and watch him in person at a practice. He's taken a lot of really visits to a lot of really good schools. He visited USC on Saturday, then flew out to Eugene on Saturday night to spend Sunday with the Ducks. I kind of thought the Ducks were, I still think it's probably the case that the Ducks could be on the outside looking in on his recruitment, just seeing how, you could see, all the people wanted to say he's going to follow his brother to Clemson, but he's taken visits to, really powerful and elite SEC programs in Ohio State. So the fact that Dan Lanning got him and then Nico, the 5-star quarterback in 23, Dante Moore out of Detroit, another 5-star quarterback in 23, got those guys on campus. The fact that they did all of that while still having some really, really important 2022 visitors is just crazy. Like, it's just another example, I think, or maybe, no, yeah, I think it's just another example of how, how much momentum is building for Lanning and this Oregon team in 2022 and beyond, and just how seriously Lanning's taken his approach to recruiting.
And they had time to bring in T Grizzly for a visit too. I thought that was dope. Yeah, I think 2023, those edge rushers, there's loads of talent at edge rushers that they've been looking at. And I know you're very familiar with Mateo. And I love Jaden Wayne. He's a Washington guy. That's another guy that, he visited a few weeks ago, I believe. So I think prioritizing, like we were talking about, the edge rushers, probably would have been nicer to have it for 2022, but you definitely want some of those guys in 23 from the West Coast. That would be huge.
Yeah, and then just another question that got asked here from John Adams. How's wide receiver looking? Any news on Coda? I don't think there's any news on Coda right now that I'm aware of, but wide receiver is definitely a position in need for the Ducks. They've been making a lot of offers in 23 and beyond, but I don't think I've really seen too many wide receivers offered. The only person I can think of really is Arliss Boardingham, who's kind of a wide receiver tight end hybrid flex kind of a deal. So I think he's someone to keep an eye on. The Ducks are in a 1v1 battle, mano-a-mano battle against Florida. For him, he was a big visitor on campus this past weekend. So like we kind of talked about with Florence, who was the main topic at the top of the video, the Ducks were able to get the last impression, which I think is really crucial in a lot of these recruitments. So I think really keeping the guys on the roster that are currently here at wide receiver is going to be where the Ducks can do, the most effective work at the position. Troy Franklin and Dante Thornton flashed a lot last year, and then Chris Hudson played really well. Isaiah Croker came on at the end. Definitely more of a veteran guy. Because we're talking about wide receivers, I wanted to make sure we talked about this because I suggested it earlier. So that's kind of the latest that I'm hearing, Dylan. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about that, but I wanted to talk about Brian McClendon leaving Miami to go to Georgia because I think that'll be another headline that Duck fans will enjoy.
Yeah, just wrapping up on Coda, I had a feeling that they were probably going to offer him. I don't have any inside information on that, but a lot of Ducks fans will know that his dad played defensive back for the Ducks. And Chase is a Medford guy, South Medford High School guy. So you have to think that they're probably on his case just because we've seen that Oregon, this staff was looking at veteran receivers in the transfer portal because they offered Jacob Cowing from UTEP. And I'm sure that they had tabs on Brendan Rice from Colorado too. So I think it'd be a nice addition if they go after him, but I haven't heard anything specific. But yeah, BMAC, that was wild. You wanna start us off because I know you were amped up about that.
Yeah, I mean, so that was it's just wild to see because, a lot of people sometimes will post stories about former Oregon coaches going somewhere or players and they're like, well, it's not an Oregon focus anymore. Like, we don't care. But yeah. I think with how a lot of people were up in arms about Cristobal's departure, and then, multiple Oregon staffers followed him to Miami. You look at Joe Salavea, Alex Mirabal, to name a few, Aaron Feld, and then Brian McClendon followed him to Miami. The Hurricanes got a commitment from a 2023 wide receiver. I think it was just 2 days ago, who was a local guy. And then now Brian McClendon gets announced as the new wide receiver coach at Georgia. And it's just crazy to see because, coaches are moving all the time. And when you have a movement like this so quickly, it's definitely surprising to see. He's a huge addition. The fact that he has the elite recruiting acumen that he has, I think is super big, and it's going to just continue to elevate the recruiting ceiling, or just to the guys that they're going to be getting at Georgia. They lost Jermaine Burton to Alabama in one of the weirdest transfers that we've seen of this whole offseason, going to the team that you just beat in the national championship. But yeah, I mean, the rich get richer. That's the easiest way to put it. And obviously it's a move that makes a lot of sense. I think I saw someone tweet on my timeline and was like, don't worry, Miami, he's going back to his alma mater, so it's okay. Or like, you guys understand, it's the alma mater angle. So it's crazy, man. It's just another move in today's college football. Like, feels like no one's job is safe and people could leave at any minute.
Man, I didn't think about that. That's funny. Yeah, I thought it was just crazy that he was officially announced at Miami as their wide receivers coach in passing game. Because for a while, it was just the fact that it was just reports and people were taking screenshots that may or may not have been real of him on Miami's athletic directory. And And then he ended up getting announced there and was hired and was, as far as I know, I think he was, making visits and going on recruiting trips with the staff. And then all of a sudden he's going just not even a month later to Georgia. And I think the Georgia thing makes sense. He coached there for 9 years, played there as well in the late 90s, early 2000s, I believe. So it makes a ton of sense for him. But I just think it's so weird that, he wasn't even on staff at Miami for a month. There's just got to be a punch in the mouth to Cristobal and some of those recruits that you were talking about that, he went and visited. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So Andrew's comment that I put up on here, he said, "How's that feel, Mario?" So, yeah, just more coaching movement. I think that the Ducks are in a great position. The more people that I talk to, I don't think that Florence is the last guy in 22 that they're going to add here. And just talking about Miami and Georgia, they're still without an offensive and defensive coordinator, which is something that is really interesting because I think when he was at Oregon, sorry to switch up real quick, but when he was at Oregon, that was kind of something that I really, gave him a lot of credit for, is that he wasn't, impulsive when it was coming to some of these hires that he had to make. He was really calculated. He vetted the heck out of everybody that he brought on board. But he's been at Miami for almost 2 months now, and they still don't have an offensive or defensive coordinator. They're making some waves on the recruiting trail. And it's got to be hard to pitch some of these guys if you still don't have an offensive and defensive coordinator in place. So, man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall, on some of those meetings in Miami just to see kind of what's going on.
Yeah, one of those recruits asked Cristobal, what's the defensive game plan? What's my fit here? I was like, I don't know. We don't have a defensive coordinator yet. Yeah, it's impressive though, the fact that they've got a couple guys from the transfer portal and some guys on the recruiting trail while not having offensive and defensive coordinators. So it makes me wonder if anybody's going to change their mind if a guy gets hired and their scheme that they bring up doesn't really fit their game plan. I wonder if that's going to play out a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. That's super crazy because everybody, it seems like that's changed head coaches. It seems like they're all set except for Miami.
Yeah, who knows how that's actually going to shake out and when they're going to get those people on board. You got obviously we talked about Dave Yulee, who's obviously an Oregon recruit. Kristen Miller from Georgia is a guy that Oregon's been after for a while. I feel like they're probably on the outside looking in, but I could be wrong. I mean, maybe that's a Dan Lanning factor, kind of a recruiting win for the Ducks. Kristen Miller was in Miami for his final visit. Josh Connerly was also in Miami for a visit this past weekend. So we're seeing a ton of overlap here, just with guys that, Mario Cristobal is still trying to, recruit that had connections to Oregon.
Yeah, and there is credit that needs to go to Cristobal, the fact that they've added some of those guys, and they're getting all these recruits on campus. Even I think that's impressive. But yeah, I mean, you can't do a whole lot without your offensive and defensive coordinators. You definitely, I think the time's starting to tick down. It's almost National Signing Day, and if they want to make any more noise and flip some guys, I feel like they'd probably need to make some hires very, very soon.
As the Ducks head into Wednesday's National Signing Day, we have some more guys for you to keep an eye on. Arliss Boardingham, the 2022 athlete that we already talked about out of Southern California, he's going to be a guy to watch. Marion Winston, I think, is another one to watch. Maybe he could kind of project as one of those edge guys that could hopefully fill a need for Oregon. He was on campus for a visit this past weekend, which is big. He was a former commit. Jordan James, the running back out of Tennessee, is another one that we talked about. I'm trying to think of anyone else. Jalen Davis Robinson in the 2022 class. Those are some of the guys to Andrew Paul. I feel like Andrew Paul is probably going to Georgia or Clemson at this point, just because the whole timing with him with that offer. Jordan James took his visit to Oregon and then got visited in home, and then after he got back from that visit, Andrew Paul got offered by Georgia. And then ultimately ended up taking a visit there to Athens this past weekend. So I feel like it's starting to kind of get a little bit clearer, but he is a name to watch for sure, since the Ducks kind of put some pressure on him and tried to get that relationship started. And I'm sure they tried to get him out for a visit. But those are some of the main guys that I think are worth watching as we head towards signing day. We're going to have another live stream tomorrow, but any recruiting or Oregon notes that you want to get out there, Dylan, before we get off?
Yeah, and just in terms of dates that I know of, just for people that are aware, Jordan James, I believe, will be committing 9 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday. I think Andrew Paul is like 9:20, 9:30. I think he's still got Oregon as a finalist. And then Dave Yulee is 3:30 Pacific. The only one I don't know when, I guess there's two. The two that I don't know when they're committing are Boardingham and Davis Robinson. I don't know if I've seen dates for either of them, but I would imagine that both are going to be committing sometime early this week, like probably Wednesday or before.
Yeah, Davis Robinson, I was told, is going to be committing Wednesday morning.
Okay.
So that's going to be an Oregon LSU battle. He took his visit to Baton Rouge over this past weekend, and I'm told that visit went really well. So going to try to do some more digging there. But after getting Florence and Terrell and Gonzalez, going to be interesting to kind of evaluate the numbers there. But before we get out of here, Dylan, where can people find more of you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at DRK Sports News. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I believe it's at Dylan Rubin King. I don't remember what exactly it's at now. Oh yeah, spring game. There you go. That's important. Yeah, April 23rd. Heck yeah. Hope to be there for that. So hopefully we can link up and check out the Ducks. But yeah, follow me on my work on Ducks Digest. I'm posting stuff on there often, and then as well on the transfer portal CFB. And if you're interested in writing or doing any sort of YouTube content, podcast content, we're looking for new people. So hit me up.
Awesome. Got to get that plug out there. If you guys are watching on the live stream at youtube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres, kindly ask that you hit the subscribe button. Really helps us grow the channel and is a tremendous help. It's free. It only takes a second out of your day. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button for us, and make sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss it anytime we go live in the future. And then go ahead and follow me on Twitter at mtorresports. You guys can see Dylan and I's ats right there on the screen. And would really appreciate it if you would give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. You can find more Oregon Ducks content at Ducks Digest. That's si.com/college/Oregon. And lock in with us on all the other social media platforms. We're at Ducks Digest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That'll do it for Dylan and I. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Big week of recruiting in store for the Ducks. Take care, everyone, and we will see you in the next episode.